This is Zateen, and this is Christian. You know them from Moulin Rouge. You may remember this outfit, and of course this one. And then there's Christian. But are they accurate? We got this fashion historian.
Hi, I'm Raissa Bretaña, and I'm a fashion historian.
She's going to walk us through what Moulin Rouge got right and what they got wrong about these looks. First, let's establish the setting.
Moulin Rouge is set in Paris, France, around the year 1900. We know this from the title card at the beginning of the movie. As we can see in the opening sequence, the Moulin Rouge is located in the Montmartre district. The story surrounds the historical Moulin Rouge, which was a popular cabaret or dance hall. It is said to be the birthplace of the famed can-can dance. This is at the height of an era known as La Belle Époque, when French culture thrived in theater, literature, music, and visual art. The director, Baz Luhrmann, translates this time period into a spectacle for 21st century audiences. I have to point out that Luhrmann is an incredibly stylistic director who incorporates chaotic, colorful sequences with contemporary music from the MTV generation. So all of the costuming choices are made to serve Baz Luhrmann's directorial vision. Costume designers Catherine Martin and Angus Strathie brought this sumptuous world to life, creating a mashup between the fashions of the turn of the 20th century with those from the turn of the 21st century. I think it's going to be really interesting to use the 2001 film Moulin Rouge as a jumping-off point to talk about the fashions of this time period. And we have a wealth of visual information when it comes to the history of the Moulin Rouge. This bohemian setting was captured by artists like Toulouse-Lautrec, who is also a character in this film.
How do you do? My name is Henri-Marie Raymond Toulouse-Lautrec.
Let's start with Zateen's sparkling diamond look.
Zateen is the star of the Moulin Rouge, and her character is one part can-can dancer, one part cabaret singer, and one part courtesan. Her character's inspired by actual Moulin Rouge performers like La Goulou, Yvette Gilbert, and Jane Avril.
So is this look accurate?
This look is definitely anachronistic and more closely resembles a 1950s Marilyn Monroe type pinup girl than it does a turn-of-the-century Moulin Rouge performer. Which makes sense for this movie because she sings a medley that's built around the song Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, made popular by Marilyn Monroe.
So this is not accurate. Let's draw Zateen's sparkling diamond look layer by layer. First, the undergarments.
Zateen's look is basically made up of modern undergarments. In this scene, Zateen is wearing panties, a garter belt, stockings, and a corset. There is a lot of inaccuracy here. Instead, the first thing a can-can dancer of this period would put on would be a combination. It is literally a combination of a chemise and drawers. This garment would feature a split crotch for convenience. This split crotch feature made the can-can dance all the more scandalous because when dancers kicked their legs up, all would be exposed. Legend has it that Baz Luhrmann wanted to incorporate this authentic feature, but had to cut it at the risk of getting an R rating. Zateen is wearing fishnets here, but she would actually be wearing black stockings. For the most part, Moulin Rouge dancers wore black stockings, which best showed the line of the leg. Existing images from the period show black stockings fastened above the knee with contrasting white garters.
And then the next layer.
Over the combination, Zateen would wear a corset. It would be different than the one shown here. The corset would be an hourglass shape that would mold the torso into the fashionable silhouette, which you can see on can-can dancers here and here. A contributing factor to the narrow waistline was the practice of tight lacing, which became popular in the late 19th century. Zateen actually blames her fainting in the movie on the tightness of her costume.
Oh, these silly costumes.
But we know she has consumption. Corsets opened at the center front with a steel busk closure and had laces in the back for tightening.
Next up, the petticoat.
Zateen might be wearing a style of petticoat that was designed specifically for can-can dancers. Can-can petticoats were notable for their shorter length, which revealed the calves and ankles when at rest. The underside of these petticoats were lined with rows of ruffles, which came to life when these skirts were lifted to expose legs and all. The dancers in the film do have ruffled petticoats, but I noticed that they're very colorful. Instead, the petticoats would be white like the undergarments of the time period, which was considered erotic.
And that brings us to the fourth layer.
So there were many variations on costumes for performers at the Moulin Rouge, but a leotard would not be one of them. There are a few common elements in Moulin Rouge costumes from this time period. Take a look at this image of La Goulou, for example. You can see she wears an ornate dress with a tightly fitted bodice and a skirt that's shorter than would be acceptable for everyday wear. In photographs, Moulin Rouge dancers are almost always holding their skirts up, so it's hard to tell how long they actually were. Because it was legs that were eroticized and the main focus, you actually see higher necklines and shorter skirts all around. La Goulou's costumes often featured ruffles at the neckline that echoed the ruffles of her petticoat. Costumes like this were the peak of eroticism at the turn of the century, but the sex appeal just doesn't translate to the 21st century audiences.
And then the shoes.
In her performance look, Zateen would likely be wearing black shoes to continue the line of the leg in the black stockings. These shoes usually featured a low heel, which dancers could hang on to when holding their legs up. A higher cut or strap would be necessary to secure the shoe to the foot during all of the wild kicking and frenetic dancing.
And next up, the hair.
Here, Zateen's hair is worn back with cascading curls, and this was not a common style. Zateen's hair would have been worn in an updo, not just for dancing, but for everyday life. La Goulou famously wore her hair in a knotted bun that sat high atop her head with a full set of bangs. We see a similar hairstyle on the character of Nini in the film, who's based on a real-life Moulin Rouge showgirl. Interestingly, the leading ladies of Toulouse-Lautrec's posters are all depicted with bright red hair. So, in that sense, Zateen's flaming tresses are accurate, but we are missing the updo.
And then there's the makeup.
Zateen wears a pale, powdered face with painted lips, rouged cheeks, and dark eye makeup. In the late 19th century, the use of cosmetics often reflected a woman's place in society. Less reputable or supposedly immoral women, like actresses, courtesans, and prostitutes, would apply makeup quite heavily. These so-called painted ladies would layer on noticeable shades like bright white with red accents. Even reputable women would accentuate their fashionably pale complexion with rice powder. This is depicted in a painting by Toulouse-Lautrec entitled Rice Powder.
And then the final layer.
Here Zateen wears a diamond-trimmed top hat, which is not so accurate. Headpieces were considered an essential part of a costume and were often used to set a leading lady apart. La Goulou stood out from the crowd by wearing a distinctive hair comb that resembled a tiara. You can see it here. We won't see female cabaret singers wearing men's top hats until the early 20th century.
So here's what Zateen would have looked like compared to the original from the film. Let's move on to Zateen's red evening gown.
This costume has become a piece of film history itself.
But is it accurate?
Well, not exactly. The main departures from historical accuracy are the bustle in the back and the shortened train.
Oh, of course.
Now we're going to draw every layer of this look. The first layer would be the undergarments.
The undergarments would be similar to those in the first look, the combination, the stockings, and the garters. The corset for this look would also be the same.
The next layer would be the petticoat.
The petticoat would follow the fashionable skirt shape of the period, which was a fluid line with a flared hem and a slight train. In this example, rows of cording and a ruffled flounce helped to create that fluted hem.
Next up, the dress.
How do I look?
Overall, this dress tends to read very contemporary, though it does have aspects of fashionable evening wear from the turn of the 20th century. This gown has the wide, deep neckline, the narrow waistline, and the fluted skirt. A similar red evening gown by the House of Worth can be seen in this 1898 portrait of socialite Edith Kingdon Gould. The The back of the bodice features a lace-up closure, which was prevalent in dress during this period. An inaccuracy here is that the dress lacks the train that's commonly seen in women's evening wear. Zateen's dress features a bustle of stacked pleats. This is not accurate, as bustles had all but disappeared from women's fashion by the 1890s. The costume designers might have chosen this design feature because bustles are a visual shorthand for the second half of the 19th century.
And then, the next layer.
Zateen accurately wears a pair of opera-length gloves, which were an essential component to fashionable evening wear. These gloves, which extended above the elbow, would have been made of silk, suede, or leather. Most women wore white or light-colored gloves, but Zateen's darker choice is a nod to the famous Moulin Rouge performer Yvette Guilbert, who was known for wearing black opera-length gloves.
And then we have the shoes.
We can't see what shoes Zateen is wearing because her dress does go down to the floor. But evening shoes featured a curved heel and were made from either silk or leather. These were made to order and could be dyed to match a specific evening ensemble.
On to the next layer.
Jewelry plays an important role in Zateen's characterization, and she is especially fond of diamonds.
Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Jewelry with precious stones was typically worn by upper-class women, but they could also be found on well-positioned courtesans, as you can see in this image of Liane de Pougy. And we have to mention the $3 million diamond necklace that Zateen wears later in the film. It features 1,308 diamonds and is the most expensive piece of jewelry made for a film, and it looks like it.
Anything else?
Fans were a chic evening accessory and were carried when attending the theater, the opera, or other forms of entertainment. The most opulent fans were made from large ostrich feathers.
On to the next layer.
In the two moments that we see Zateen wear the red dress, she wears her hair in two different ways. First, we see it pinned up, and later we see it down in waves. Again, the first style is closer to correct. Her hair would have been upswept, with curls piled high atop her head. Some styles featured fullness on the sides, which was a precursor to the Edwardian pompadour, which would be fashionable in the years to come.
And finally, the makeup.
The makeup here feels pretty accurate. It's the same as the previous look, although slightly less outwardly theatrical, more akin to society makeup techniques. Respectable women with a higher social status would have applied makeup more subtly to create a natural flush.
So here's how Zateen would look in evening wear if this were historically accurate. Finally, let's get into Christian's white tie look.
There's a lot to say here. Men's formal evening wear would be what we now call white tie. The evening suit was the uniform of the Grand Monde, which was the glittery set that epitomized the French idea of high life. Men's formal wear has evolved little since then. The same basic elements remain, and the overall look is familiar to us now.
Let's get into the layers. First up, the undergarments.
Regardless of the occasion, Christian would be wearing full underwear to protect the outer clothing. This would either be a one-piece combination called a union suit or individual undershirt and drawers. He would also be wearing knitted socks held up by sock garters. This is because elastic threads that helped socks hug the leg and stay up were not yet invented.
The next layer, the shirt and collar.
Christian wears a crisp white shirt and collar. Optional was a removable shirt front, or bib, which would be heavily stiffened and created an even more rigid silhouette. The shirt would be made of white cotton, with a stiff, starched front, flat with no pleats. Detachable collars fastened to the shirt via a collar stud. We can actually see the collar stud here, when Christian removes his collar for the Elephant Love medley. Some of these collars had turned down wings, but the most formal ones stood straight up. These were remarkably high, standing up 4 or 5 inches. These detachable collars would not have been comfortable, but men were used to wearing them.
And then the next layer.
Dress shirts did not typically have buttons, but instead finished holes for studs. His shirt would have likely had French cuffs, which would be turned up before being fastened with cufflinks. Studs and cufflinks were often purchased as a set and could be highly decorative, using precious stones and other luxurious materials.
And the next layer, Pants and suspenders.
From what we can see of Christian's pants, they seem to be pretty accurate. Pants were cut pretty straight in this era, with pleats at the front hip. Pants would have been held up by suspenders, and those would have been white for evening.
The next layer, the vest and bow tie.
Christian wears a cream-colored bow tie and a red vest. Christian's vest is likely a costuming choice to make him stand out against a crowd of white vests and to convey his bohemian spirit.
You're not another of Toulouse's oh so talented, charmingly bohemian, tragically impoverished protégés.
Well, you might say that, yes.
Oh, no!
I don't think anyone trying to pass for a respectable gentleman would choose a red vest over a traditional white one. The fashionable evening vest was cut very low, exposing much of the shirt front. The vest was rather fitted, in keeping with a fashionable male silhouette. These vests often incorporated an elongated shawl lapel and fastened low with 2 or 3 buttons.
And the next layer.
Christian wears a tailcoat, which is the most formal jacket in men's evening wear. The tailcoat was also termed a dress coat to differentiate it from a dinner jacket, which later became known as a tuxedo. And the tuxedo, if you can believe it, was considered the more casual option.
What makes the tailcoat different?
It's cut rather short in the front, ending at the natural waistline, with tails that extend back to behind the knee. The dress coat is never buttoned. It's worn open to reveal the shirt and the vest. The lapel was made of a contrasting textile, either a silk satin or a silk fye. Just as Christian wears it, true evening suits were always black.
After that, the shoes.
We don't get a good look at Christian shoes, but traditional men's formal shoes were called pumps. These were made of patent leather and featured a low square heel and a fye bow that adorned the toe.
And finally, the hat and gloves.
Christian wears a top hat and white gloves, and these are the accessories that complete the look. The top hat is the most distinctive accessory in men's formal evening wear, and the movie makes quite a spectacle of this. Moulin Rouge dancers were actually famous for kicking the hats off of the heads of male patrons without using their hands.
Hang on to your hat!
Top hats were covered in either silk, velvet, or brushed beaver fur. Some varieties of top hats were collapsible and could be stored flat when not being worn. You can see Christian's white gloves sitting on the table here, and you can also see white gloves on many of the men attending the Moulin Rouge. Other optional accessories include a cane or a flower in the buttonhole of one's lapel. Overall, this is a convincing look because he is mistaken for the Duke.
I'm not a duke.
Not a duke.
I'm a writer.
Conclusion.
These costumes capture the essence of the time period, and the departures from historical accuracy are deliberate and meaningful. Overall, the costume design perfectly serves the story, the characters, and the director's vision, which is always the goal of film costume design.